Hello. And if you are watching the video, welcome to the premiere episode of Season 7 of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And if you're listening to the audio, well, welcome back. You heard the opening to the show and you know who my guest is. My guest is Chief Tom Marchiano. He is from Chester, New York. He's the chief there. And Chief, why don't you give us and our listeners a little bit of your background, please?
First off, I want to thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate that. You're doing great things here.
Thank you.
But about me, I joined my volunteer firehouse, which is where I still am today, when I was 16 years old, back in 2004. Pretty much followed the fire service like every little boy does, and I actually just kind of pursued it. Made my ranks up through lieutenant and captain, and always said I didn't really want to be a fire chief because I always liked being the guy in the back, but here we are. So I am now currently the first assistant chief in our department. Love doing training, love doing some instructing, love the guys that I work for. I don't want to say that, they work for me because without them, I wouldn't be where I am. So I appreciate that and all their help with me. In 2009, I actually started a career as 911 dispatcher for our county here. So on that level, I handle answering 911 calls, and I also dispatch police, fire, and EMS. So dispatching fire is always fun, especially if you get a working fire. The only time it's not fun is if it's for your own department. So, then we're kind of missing it. In addition to that, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I joined the Orange County Tech Rescue Team. It was kind of a way for me to get back into a role where I'm not the guy in charge, where I can kind of be, I don't want to say grunt work, but a guy that's doing it more hands-on type stuff. So that's been pretty good. We're not too busy, but we do get some calls here and there. So the training is good with that. And around that same time frame, I linked up with Nick Higgins from the Firehouse Tribune, and he brought me on as a contributor with that. And so I write articles for him, and now him and I have this monthly podcast webinar thing we do, which is really starting to take off. Definitely partial thanks to you on that. So pretty much it. That's me in a nutshell.
Well, you use the term that we don't often hear in today's modern fire service, especially in a volunteer department with the challenges that we're facing. And we back a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, I had Steve Hirschon, who was at that point, the chairperson of the National Volunteer Fire Council. We've had a couple of podcasts about this. We had Chief Tony Correa was on that night too. And, it is quite a bit of a challenge. Things have changed dramatically since my days in volunteer, which was over 40 years ago. And yet, you use the word, you love what you do. You love the men and women in your department. And like I said, this is starting our 7th season. And I have to say, I could probably count the number of guests, and they're all, dedicated to what we do. There's no doubt about that. But I could probably count on maybe one, maybe two hands, the number of people who have actually said, I love what I do, especially those who are officers or chiefs. And to hear you say that, and you said it with conviction. It wasn't just like trying to roll off your tongue. Well, yeah, I love the guys that work. You really said it with conviction. And I think that's so important for our listeners to hear, whether your career, whether you volunteer, your combo, your WUI, it makes no difference. The fact is that for many of us, and I was one of those who was older already for the Emergency Crowd, the TV show. I was already in college when it came out, and I had already had a life plan for myself. I was planning to be a rabbi in the conservative movement, and but I met our local firefighters when I was 7 years old. We had a little grass fire in our woods behind our house, and they brought it. We had an old. This had to be late 50s, maybe early 60s. And they had an old, what I consider today an old fire truck. Of course, they would consider me an old firefighter. but they were a couple of guys went in the back with the pre-connect, not the pre-connect, but the old the garbage hose,
Like a trash line?
yeah, the trash line, yeah. And I went down to the apparatus, and I met the engineer, and he showed me how dials work and gave me a lollipop. And from that moment on, I was in love with firefighters. I just made my parents drive me to all 4 stations in my community outside of Boston. And then when I rode my bike, I visited others. And when I had my license, I was driving all over Greater Boston. And I loved what I did. There was no doubt about it. I fell into it by accident. I didn't even know there was a department down the street from our apartment. But I loved what I did, and I still have loved it ever since that time. And even though my career was short because of an injury after 8 years, it's always been how I kind of defined myself. I still define myself as a husband, a father, a grandfather now, an educator, because I've always been an educator, and a firefighter and a man of God. And it was so refreshing to hear you say that just a couple of moments ago, because I could see, if you're listening to the audio, you couldn't see his face, but if you watch the video on YouTube, you'll see how Chief Marchiano's face smiled, lit up when he said, I love the people I work with. And considering the topic you're going to be sharing with us this morning, I'm convinced there was no doubt. I mean, I knew it from our conversation on the phone last week. But the fact is, seeing that on your face, I know you really care about the men and women in your department. How many people do you have? How many volunteers do you have?
So our department has 3 separate fire companies. And I would say, adding up, we're probably department wide, probably we'll go with 100, give or take a few.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And obviously, it's volunteers. So we get some that show up way more than others, which is expectable. But on paper, on the active roster, that's probably what we have. 2 of the firehouses have about maybe 50 members, and then another one has about 39 or 40. So we're give or take around that number.
That's wonderful. That really
it fluctuates
in today's society, and as we mentioned, what we're facing today. That's terrific. Now, is Orange County south of Sullivan or flipped or?
Yes, so we're south of Sullivan. We are pretty much between Sullivan and Rockland, and then Ulster's on the other side of us to the north. So we border parts of Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania, Westchester. We literally have like 7 counties that surround us. So
right.
it's definitely getting more of a suburb of New York City.
Right.
In the 34 years I'm 34 now. So my parents have moved up here when I was 2 or 3 years old, I believe. So for my whole life, pretty much, this is all I know. And it has drastically changed, and not all for the negative.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we say that about even the communities I've only been here 30 years, but it sure has changed.
Exactly.
30 years here in Coral Springs.
More people to get here, the busier I am. So
right, exactly. All right,
no complaints.
With that intro, because, and again, our viewers and listeners cannot even think about questioning your devotion to your team members, because that's really what we are as a fire service. We are a team.
Absolutely.
And not just in our own little nests, but we have our mutual aid compacts that we have with our surrounding towns. Some of it's auto aid, some of it's on call aid. We see this around the country. We have municipal agencies that always still make sure they have great compacts with other communities to help them. I'm from Greater Boston area, and the city of Boston has an amazing right around in almost a circle of this of Massachusetts. You could cut out almost like a half moon of departments that will come in and help Boston or any of those communities when needed. And I think that based on what you and I talked about last week and this topic we're discussing today, that I'm hoping that some of this message today will hit ears of, as I mentioned before, we have buffs who listen to the show, not necessarily all active firefighters, or they just love what we do and they follow us. Some of them work on aid groups. In other words, we know, like fire police. We have second alarmers in Philadelphia. We have the Boston Canteen group who help.
Yep.
And a lot of us are blessed with these people who, they're not actually firefighters, but these men and women will still come out at all hours of the day and night to help support our firefighters by giving them cold drinks, hot coffee, hot tea, hot chocolate, up in the colder climes and stuff like that. And I think that what we're going to talk about now, from your topic, 6 tips for every firefighter, I think a lot of that could actually apply to many of us just as regular citizens too. So why don't we start that off? Let's talk about tip number 1.
All right. So my 6 tips for the new fire officer. My theory behind creating this presentation and what started off as just ideas in my head was that I was fortunate enough coming up in my department that I had people in front of me that were able to groom me into who I am today. I was able to follow their steps. I was able to look to them for advice. Talking to some of my friends who were also in the same role as me or in other officer positions, I started noticing that not every department was like that. And I kind of found it a shame that not everyone's learning the same way. So I thought to myself, I was like, well, what if I take the things that I've learned, put this down in a presentation, and if someone doesn't have the proper guidance, I can assist them, even if it's just them learning one thing from me. It's a positive and they can build off of that. So my first tip and I call it 6 tips for a new fire officer, but really could be for anyone, as you said. But my first tip is always study up. So there's a lot of people in the fire service that get into their officer position and they get some type of overwhelming feeling or something that I'm an officer and I no longer have to, learn this, learn that. I'm the boss. I know everything. And that is not the case. Yeah, maybe your classes can change. You go from a lot less hands-on stuff to more lecture-based training. But you still have to study up. You still have to learn. If you're done learning in the fire service, you might as well pack it up and get out. There's no reason to continue what you're doing. But as far as an officer, like, take your officer classes. Each state offers up their own fire officer 1 class or their fire officer 2 class or whatever. And then there's national levels. And then if you completed those, a lot of counties or outside organizations have leadership courses that are also good. Just because you're not getting a state certification out of it doesn't mean it's any less valuable to your training. And I think it's good to get into the advanced level a little bit. So your technical rescues, your water rescues, and stuff like that. And I tell people, even though if that's not an interest to you and you don't want to go to like the technical level of it, at least get to an operational level. Because if you're operating on scene and you have a water rescue, let's say, you should have some type of idea of what you need to be doing in order just to keep things copacetic until the actual water rescue team arrives on scene. But if you're going to show up to that incident and you're not prepared for anything of what's going to be thrown at you, then you're failing your job as an officer. I also think cross training is important. If you're going to be in the fire department, I believe you should learn all aspects of the job, whether it's truck, engine, rescue, brush fire stuff, even a little bit of EMS. It's all part of our job at the end of the day. So you should have at least some type of knowledge within that. And also, as a dispatcher, I think we should know dispatch also. How we get dispatch, how's the call processed, why are sometimes what we're being dispatched out to and what we're arriving to 2 different things. How does that get mixed in translation? I run a new member school here in our fire department, and one of the topics that we do for them is we go up to our 911 center and we kind of show them just for an hour or two. They sit in the floor with us and they just kind of see how things roll. They see that this caller is telling us the house is on fire, but when we get on scene, it's only a microwave on fire. So it kind of shows them the ropes of where terminology gets mixed in translation and that the dispatcher can only tell you what we're being told.
Right, right. And
Um,
I think that you brought up something very important, which is that all too often, in previous years, we just called dispatchers, and we referred to them that. And of course, if anything went wrong in some, we always try to blame them. But the fact of the matter is, dispatchers are really the first responders because they are the ones, whether it's fire, police, EMS, they're the ones who take that initial call. If it's not, not from a pull block, something like that, if it's a phone call, and they have to keep their wits about them, no matter what they hear in the background or things like that, elicit the necessary information so they can provide it to us. Again, whether it's fire, police, or EMS, they're the ones we really, I don't think we appreciate them well enough many times of the job that they can do for us, not just the initial dispatch, but when you tell them, activate mutual aid, I want this in this town, get them in, stuff like that. They turn around, they take care of that because you or the OIC still has to pay attention to what's happening on that scene, that you just can't start sitting in the buggy and start making a bunch of phone calls yourself. Hey, Bill, yeah, it's Tom over here, and just could you send an extra tanker over to us when you have a chance? Can't work that way.
yeah,
We
exactly.
need it. We need it, and those are where the dispatches come in.
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that you take your crew, your new members up to there to let them see how the dispatch center works.
Yeah, it's definitely a big help because you'd be surprised at like how many times we have fire chiefs in our county that get on scene of a motor vehicle accident and the first thing they ask is, was an ambulance dispatched out to this? Well, a car accident is a glorified ambulance call. So yeah, the ambulance is definitely going to this. Like, it's not stuff that we need to that should be asked. So at least now, yeah, these kids are young, but when they do get to the officer ranks, because some of them definitely will be, I see in their future, they're going to know already. And they know that when we process a car accident at work, it gets dispatched out for fire and EMS. So you don't have to get on scene and ask, like, is an ambulance coming for this? It's already common knowledge that it is. So I think it gives them a good reason why. And then it kind of just shows them why we do things so they know on their aspect of it.
Yeah, very good, very good. Continue, please.
Um, the last thing I kind of have for the study up is don't forget about the basics. Um, our fire service in the long run pretty much relies on basic skills. We're not getting tech rescues every day. We're not getting extrication calls every day. We're not even really getting fires every day, but we are getting bread and butter operations, small type of fires, brush fires, fire alarms. So make sure we're still studying up on that stuff. Um, Alarm panels are always changing, and we run hundreds of automatic fire alarms a year. So if you find the class on alarm panels and stuff, take one. It can't hurt. It's not going to hurt your ability as an officer whatsoever. Take your basic truck company operations, your engine company operations. Do what you need to be best. I always use the NBA as a example for this. I always say, you know, LeBron James makes millions of dollars a year, but he's still here shooting free throws in practice because it's a basic skill, but he has to do it. So if they're still doing their basic skills and they're on the professional level, why aren't we still doing our basic skills? And that's kind of how I look at that. And it's amazing how many people you see, how many chiefs you see who get once they get that buggy and the white helmet, you never see him at training ever again, and you just don't. I never understood it. I don't get the reasoning behind that, but
Well, it's like seeing videos where you see someone wearing a white hat walking around the warm zone with their turnout gear open, helmets tilted way back on the head. And, here we are trying to save our brothers and sisters by telling them to wear, tight up, button up, zip up, everything you can of your bunker gear. Yes, we know that this is not the greatest bunker gear in the world, unfortunately, because of our most recent discoveries over the last few years of PFAS and PFOS, but we're working to overcome that. But that doesn't mean we're telling you don't wear it when you're doing the stair climbs or something like that, when you don't need to and you're going to sweat a lot. But when you're on a call, you need to wear your gear, and everybody has to wear your gear, and you have to know what your position is, whether you're in the hot zone, the warm zone, or the cold zone. And, and you can never stop. One of the things again, as I mentioned, as a lifelong educator, you can never, especially in the fire service or law enforcement or EMS, you can never stop being a student.
Agreed, 100%.
If you want to stop being a student, then you need to find a different vocation or avocation, because none of these three are for you if you're not going to be constantly willing to learn
No,
and grow.
it's always changing. And I'm not going to be the guy that says that I always have my gear on, but like 99% of the time, if I'm not getting dressed, I'm not leaving my Chevy Tahoe. I'm staying right by it, and or at least I'm going to kind of stay out of the zone. I'm also the kind of guy that will get dressed regardless if I'm going to leave my truck or not. I feel like if my guys are going to be doing something, then I might as well, if I'm not at my command post still ready to go in case someone needs you for something, then I'm not doing my job as that either. So that's my take on that. But
good point. Very good point. All right, so we move to our next tip.
So this is a fun one. And this is one that I kind of wish that I knew more when I was lieutenant and captain than I know about how it works now, but was setting a goal list. So the first thing you always do when you become an officer is you're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. And sometimes you accomplish it and sometimes you don't. The main reason why I feel people don't accomplish it is because they set too many goals and they want it done right now. So they do it either halfway or not properly. So when I got in as second assistant chief 3 years ago, I said to myself, all right, our chief terms, I could be a chief for 9 years in our department. I can get 3 years in the position of second assistant, 3 in the position of first assistant, and 3 in the term as chief itself. So in these 9 years, what do I want to see accomplished? So what I did is I created a list and I said, here's the things that I want to do in these 9 years. And then you have to prioritize it. So which one do I want to do first? What do I want to see after that? Pretty much from most important to least important. And so far, I've accomplished everything I want so far. Maybe not always the way I wanted to, or necessarily in the time frame I wanted, but it has gotten accomplished. So I think if you set your goals and give yourself a realistic time frame to allow you to juggle your firehouse life and your personal life and your career life, whatever you got to do, you can make it work. And in my department, we've gotten some new box alarms. We've gotten new engines. We have a new tower ladder on order. We got new portable radios for us. And now we have new radios coming that are going to be installed in our rig soon. We switched the chief card thing around a little bit, which I wanted to make our fire police units match. I've gotten rewritten our SOGs with some insight from our other officers. So, that's not just a me thing, but I took insight from them. So there was a list of things that I had that I planned 4 years ago that even to this day aren't completely finished yet, but I'm still crossing them off the list one by one. So I think the important thing that people need to remember is, like I said, get a list of your goals, set which ones you want to do, and give yourself realistic time frame to do it. Don't rush it. If you don't get to it, that's fine. Work well with the guys that are behind you and put that into their lap. Hey, here's what I've been working on. If you're smart and you're including your officers in your decision making when you are the guy in charge, then they're most likely going to be following your lead anyway, and they're going to want to continue what you were doing. So therefore, even if you're not the one to complete your goal, the guy behind you can still do it. It's all about the old saying, make it better than how you found it. So that's the way I look at it. Our instructors in our fire class and stuff have always said stuff like that. So I've always kind of taken it and grabbed it by the horns and said, well, I want to, when I finish my chief term in my whole 9 years, I want to be able to say that, you know what, this is what it looked like when I was there or when I started. And here's the positive that came out of it when I'm finished.
That's good. And also I think we can actually apply that to any new firefighter comes into a department. You have a lot still to learn. You've been through your academy or your training sessions, whatever, but you should set some goals for yourself as a firefighter. What do you want to do in your new department? You finally got a job, or you finally got accepted as a volunteer in this department. You wanted to do it. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish other than, well, I want to be on the nozzle? Yeah, we all know that. Okay. We've all been there. We've done that. And there are lots of other things we can do as firefighters too. But think about what you'd like to accomplish if this is going to be whether a vocation for you or if it's going to be an avocation for you as a volunteer or part pay, whatever. You still want to be a contributing member. And contributing means more than just showing up at calls.
Correct.
And the best way of doing that is what interests you? What are there committees in the department that you might be interested in helping, or maybe you have experience. Maybe your profession, from your profession, you can contribute something from that and bring that to your fire department.
Yeah.
So I think we all should. Again, I'm just underscoring what the way I look at learning. Learning should be a lifelong endeavor, and sometimes it's hard lessons, yes, but we can all set goals for ourselves to learn, to better ourselves. We do it with hobbies. You say, oh, I want to learn to play guitar. I want to learn to play piano. I want to learn to jump from a plane with a parachute. We all set these goals and we do our best to fulfill them to the best of our abilities. None of us are perfect. That's why we have these at the end of pencils.
Correct.
We all make mistakes.
That's correct. And you hit the nail on the head. So my presentation is geared more towards being an officer. So I have officer accomplishments in there that one should want to task. However, you bring up a good point. I'm a 16-year-old kid coming in, and what do I want to be? All right, I want to strive to be an interior firefighter. I go to fire academy, I get my firefighter 1 from New York State, and I pass my certifications for Chester, and boom, I'm a interior firefighter. All right, well, now what? Where do you want to go now? So you've made your first goal, but build off of that goal. All right, I want to make myself really proficient in truck company operations, or I want to make myself real proficient in engine company operations. And it's okay to, like I said earlier, you have to know the aspects of the whole job.
Right.
But it's okay to get into one topic and kind of make yourself a true professional at that topic. And the reason why I say that is because earlier when we started this show, you had said that the fire department's a team. And it's perfect because if you look at any sports franchise, you have people who are solid at their own positions, but they know the aspect of every position.
Right.
You're not going to expect the lineman in a football team to go throw a football 75 yards for a pass. However, he knows how the position has to be played, but he just handles his own. So, and it's the same thing in the fire service. Yeah, this guy might be really great at putting out a fire with a nozzle, and he might not be great going to the roof cutting a hole, but he knows how it's done. So find where your comfort level is, especially in the volunteer service. I would say that, and make that your, I don't want to say profession, but make that your topic that you really want to excel at. And then once you get to where you're really comfortable and you feel like you're excelling there, move up and maybe break into something else. Like, all right, cool, I did this. Let me get into this level of training now and see where I can take myself with this. It's the whole thing is just about setting goals.
Exactly.
It's really what it is. You can look at it as continued training, like I said earlier, keep training, but look at it as goals too. And in order to accomplish my rescue technician basic or whatever you want to do, I have to have these classes in order to do that. So each of those is a goal to get where you want to go.
Right. And I think you said something at the beginning in tip number one that was very important, which is that if you want to learn, there are always going to be pathways for you to follow. It's not just going to be the big national conferences. You have regional and you have local conferences. New York, of course, the New York State Firefighters Chiefs Association is wonderful. With at least my remembrance of the days when I was up in Onondaga County, that they were very good with that. And I know even in Jersey, some of my friends there who are now battalion chiefs and Nick, our mutual good friend, you have people who are willing to put on weekend class or something like that. And doesn't necessarily have to be the glorified case of hazmat on a Saturday and Sunday. It could be something of better way to clear a house, a better way to do searches. It could be one of the standard practice, get through the lock on the door, whether you're using the Halligan or tried and true or some of the new tools that are coming out. The fact is that there's always something. If you feel that you're in a rut, all you have to do is go to an officer or go to one of your chiefs and say, hey, is there something else I'd like to learn some more about doing this. And believe me, if you go and say, I'd like to learn more, I'm willing to learn more and work harder, I don't think you'll find any officer, line officer or chief officer who'll say, oh no, we don't do that in this department. No. They'll be very happy to hear you say that.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect thing. I have young kids here that are always asking questions that I guess you can say are outside of their realm a little bit, but we're not going to say no. Like, hey, you want to learn how to rappel off a 75-foot building? Here we go. We're going to show you how this will be done. Not something we do in our department, but we'll show you the ropes on it.
A very good pun.
Yeah, I like that. That's right. But you brought up the fire conferences, and it's funny you say that because Nick and I actually did our podcast yesterday, and we brought in this girl, Taylor Anderson from Couplings Fire Podcast, and she runs or has a part in running a fire conference in Nebraska. And one of the discussions we had were that sometimes the smaller training is even better for the firefighter than the big expos like Firehouse or FDIC. Not that those are bad training; they're all good. I've been to them. You learn great things, but sometimes on a smaller level, smaller amount of people that attend, you get more one-on-one with the instructors, and it allows you to train more. The best training that we did for my department in the 4 years I've been a chief so far, we brought in a company called Take a Door Fire Rescue out of Syracuse. And they came down to the man versus machine class. It was a 2-day class. And day one was like a 4-hour lecture followed by 4 hours of some hands-on. And then day two was pretty much evolutions. I got 30 guys from my department in it. It was hands-on at all points in time. There was no standing around. If you were standing around, it was because the instructor was showing you something. If you weren't doing that, they had everyone doing their own thing and working. And to this day, a year out, I still get people who say that it was a great class. we have since gotten like 12, 15 new people in our department since we had that. So it's definitely something I want to try to bring back in because I'll have enough people that I can run through it again who weren't here the first time. And to me, there's no price on training. If it's going to benefit my guys, I think it's definitely worth it. My board of fire commissioners seem to agree with me on that, so they don't give me any hard time with it. But I think you saying that these small town conferences and stuff seem to really almost be more beneficial than the big stuff.
And I can say that not good that I had those in my day, but I I was fortunate enough that my good friend Joe DeVito invited me in 2017. He was the education director for the rebirth of the Great Florida Fire School, and he had been on the show already, and you know, it was still, I was probably just a year into the podcast, and but I got to meet some really great people. Besides Joe, I got to meet Battalion Chief John Dixon and Battalion Chief John Hayowick from Beyond the Basics, and the fact was that, you know, we didn't. I think maybe we had like 80 firefighters came to that the first year, and the first year I didn't teach. I was just there to shoot videos and some photos, and plus, as I told you on the phone, Joe's whole premise to get me in there was just to get me to feel like I was part of the fire service again that day. But then I went back. Then following year, he called me to say, "Are you ready to, you know, come in October again?" I said, "Yep, I'll be there, Joe." He goes, "Good, because I want you to teach." I said, "Huh?" He says, "I want you to teach this year." I said, "Joe, have you been on that back porch of yours with a little, you know, JD and something like that, thinking, you know, with a good cigar?" He goes, "No, no, no, no. Steve, you've been a teacher. I listened to the podcast. I've been on the podcast. You should be teaching." I said, "What do you want me to teach?" He goes, "You find something you're passionate about." And I was just getting into firefighter health, wellness, and the cancer initiative. So that's what I set it up on. And the course is called The Elephant in the Firehouse.
Makes sense.
Okay, because you know, nobody wants to admit they see the elephant there, but
It's there.
everybody's seeing an elephant. And so the first year I had, I think, 5 students. Second year we had 12 students. Then unfortunately COVID kicked in. But it was really nice to see the difference between from the first students who took it the first year, and then how I had adapted a little bit and changed it around a little bit for the second year, and told me how much they really liked it and how much more they got out of it. That, and considering that it was about health, wellness, and the cancer initiative, and this is before we really knew about PFAS in our gear, I was just thrilled that they took that attitude. And when I got their sheets back, you know, they all said, you know, they really liked the class because it wasn't the same routine classes they see, you know, getting through the door or better search with a tool, without a tool, left, do I go right, do I go down this was something totally different that they really hadn't seen yet. And I was so happy that I picked something that was important to me and that now other firefighters found important to them, because they're still in the trenches. They're still facing those carcinogens every working fire they go on, from a wastebasket fire to a dumpster fire to a big box store, working house fire. That stuff's going to be there. We know that now. And most departments, I think, both career and volunteer, are doing their best to do decon and things like it, you know, and do that. There's always room for more. There's always room to be a little bit better, but at least the education ball has been rolling. And so I think one of the things that we also have to kind of see if we can temper as leaders, those of you who are leaders, especially chief officers or the safety officer, things like that, is that we have to, you know, make sure our firefighters know that besides the dangers that we all know that's in firefighting, we have the hidden dangers today that we don't see, we don't know, you know, hydrogen sulfide. great example. If we know about it, it's too late.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
we don't have the detectors on. So, I mean, and this, you know, these detectives are still relatively young in the fire service, you know, in my perspective, but they save lives. And everybody needs to learn about them. It's not, there's no glorified position or rank because you learn about hydrogen sulfide, other than, you know what, you could save yourself so you can go home to your family. By
100%.
knowing what hydrogen sulfide can do to you and how fast it can do it to you. You know.
Right. And that falls right into the goal list too, because
Yeah.
even when you're, one of the goal lists that an officer should have is, how can you make things better for your members? It's, face it, firefighting is never going to be a completely safe thing. There's always going to be something out there. But there are ways that we can make it safer or make some things more preventable. At the end of the day, you know as much as I know, you know, we're both realists here, that if you're going to get cancer, you're going to get your cancer. It's going to happen. But there are ways that we can definitely try our best to prevent that from happening. And I think that's something that should definitely be on the goal list of every officer is, all right, I want to make sure that at least at minimum, all my officers have gas meters on their radio straps. So when they're going inside, they have an additional CO meter or something that they know off the top that, hey, we need to get out of here. Maybe not every firefighter has it, but at least if you're linked up with the officer, he's got his.
Right.
Which we do have. So,
You know, it's like when ticks first came out. You know,
right.
there was probably one in the department, not even one in every truck. There was one in the department. And now, not only do we have usually one on every, probably each major apparatus showing up has at least one tick on it, but now we have the ticks that are built into our SCBAs. You know, they're not all the same. They're, you know, and you know, of course, our good friend and Andy Starnes at Insight Training LLC can tell you about all the different types of ticks, what's good for what's not good for that, etc. But the fact is that we have them, and now we're just trying to get people to use them more. You know, they're in your truck, they're charged.
Right. Just use it.
Take the damn thing out and use it. You know.
And again, you know, it may not make anything safer for you. It's not going to prevent anything into the day, but it's going to give you a better chance to be ready for what might occur.
Exactly. All right, number 3. These are even better than when we talked about it on the phone last week.
Yeah. So number 3 is interesting too, because you brought up the dispatchers earlier and how they're kind of like a unsung hero almost. I feel that way about number 3. So number 3 is I want to utilize knowledge from others, and more, to be more specific on that, the senior man in your company. So they're kind of unsung heroes in my book. Every firehouse has them. Always have that senior guy who may or may not have ever been an officer, but is always there for the knowledge and always there to help you out. We have some senior guys in our firehouse who are still around who did make it through the ranks. They went through captain, lieutenant, and chief. We also have senior guys who never went down the line side, but they're home runs. And I didn't really know that until maybe just before I became lieutenant. I didn't really see what the senior guy really meant. Like I knew being in the back seat, there was always the older guy there who I can always kind of trust. But we have a guy in our firehouse, Paul Cork, who is he was a New York City firefighter, retired now. But just before I was lieutenant, I was doing ride-alongs with him down in the city. So I'd go down to his company in the Bronx, and he was the senior man there. And that's where I kind of realized the respect that, although he's not the officer of the house, he gets the respect from the men because he's been there for so long. He has so much knowledge. And I was like, wow, like this is how it should be like in our firehouses. And in our firehouse, he was obviously that guy here too. So we kind of shined to him a little bit, like kind of take under a wing a little. And then it's not just him, there's a whole bunch of guys, but he's definitely someone that if I was going to make a decision on a fire scene that I can say, hey, Paul, what do you think of this? Like, you ever seen this before? Don't forget, like, I'm new, just turned lieutenant, been lieutenant for 1 month, and I'm at happen to be in charge of something, and I'm like, well, I've never seen this in my life. But if he's there, I could be like, what do you got? And he was never a kind of guy that would really try to take control from you, but he would tell you, like, yeah, do this or do that, and let you do your own thing.
He was more of a guide.
Correct. Yep. That's exactly what it was. And there's also another guy in our firehouse, Joe. He was chief in the early 90s. And when he got out as chief, he was pretty much our lead chauffeur. He was doing all driver training for us. He was at every call whenever he wasn't working. And he was always great to have also. So I can remember specifically going to some type of hazmat incident or something that we have a pretty large industrial park, so we do some hazmat stuff there and chemical spills. And it was one of my first calls as a lieutenant, and I can remember we're coming down the road, and dispatch gives me some type of size up, and they asked me a question. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I can remember looking over at him driving, and he kind of just like either shook his head or shook his head like no or yes, So I can kind of like, he's not going to tell me what the answer is, but he's going to guide me in the direction. So that was always good, and that happened countless number of times going to calls. Even to this day, he's not as active as he was, obviously, when he was a little younger, but he's still a guy that I can go up to and say, hey, Joe, here's what I'm dealing with. What do you think? Did you ever deal with this in your terms or whatnot? And he'll be like, either, nope, never seen it, or he'll be like, yeah, here's what I think you should do. So I think utilizing those are definitely, or the senior manager is definitely beneficial to anyone who wants to move up, because don't look at them as guys who have never been an officer. Look at them as guys who have seen all the knowledge, and they're always the guy in the back seat.
That's a good point, and I think just want to add something to it that I've been, I guess, promoting. I'll say it politely. I've probably been a little bit more than promoting it, but to what you just said, I think we also have to remember that after a firefighter, he or she spends 20, 25, 30 years doing the job. Again, volunteer career doesn't make any difference. And they retire. Once in a while, they like coming back and they'll knock on the door and maybe they'll come in, they want to join you for lunch or something like that, just for a visit. Because you have to remember, when they retired, they lost half of their world basically, because they were spending a good half of their life with the fire service. And sometimes they just want to come back and, Bill's back again. Oh my God, what are we going to do? How do we get rid? No, you welcome Bill in, because Bill still has more years than any one of you, more experience than any one of you sitting at going to sit down at that lunch table. And he can teach you in 20 minutes something that you won't learn for another couple of years.
Oh yeah.
So we have to treasure these people, whether like they're the senior firefighter in the barn or they've retired, and maybe they've been gone out of the service for 3, 4, 5 years already. But you maybe once a year you have a breakfast and you invite them all back. Those who can still, you do something to show them that they still have value. Because for me, being lost out of it, number one, because I was injured, and then I had to become an inspector, which I enjoyed for the year until we wound up moving out of the Syracuse area. But I felt kind of like robbed of something that was dear and near to me. I lost it because we moved, that's for sure. And I couldn't be an active firefighter again, but I could do something in a fire department. And unfortunately, my career jobs taking me to different places, took me down to Hollywood, Florida, then back up to Margate, Florida, then Jersey, and then back down here in 1990. But that's why everything, like, for example, I think I mentioned on our call last week that, every vehicle that I've had since 1985, when I had to get out of the service, the fire service, I still carry a full BLS rescue bag in my car, and rescue ropes, rescue gloves, a couple of fire extinguishers, everything in because it's just, I'm not in the fire department anymore. I'm 70 plus years old, but it's still, I could not in good conscience drive past an emergency
and not
with
help.
nobody else there without helping. And if I'm going to help, then I need to have gloves on today, of course. You know, I mean, I lucked out that as I got out in 85 was just the beginning of the AIDS, and look in those first 2 years, how that changed the entire scope
Oh,
of the
absolutely.
service and what we had to do when we went on medical calls. So if I'm going to have gloves, then I need a light, I need a BP cuff, I need this, I need that, stuff like that. I've done several emergencies on board airplanes as well, because there wasn't a doctor on the flight. And they said, well, who can, and I usually identify myself when I sit down to that cabin attendant in my zone. I will tell him or her, by the way, I'm a former firefighter, medic, and if there's an emergency, please feel free to call on me. And they have. And unfortunately, I learned in one of the hardest ways that my bag in the car is better than what the way the plane.
Oh, yeah.
But I did change Delta around. I will tell you that in a story that we don't have to do here on the show. But when we talk again, I'll tell you about my Delta flight. But I think that we always have to remember that none of us, no matter how much they say, well, I'm finally retiring after 30 years in this flight department. I love it. I loved it here, but it's going to be great to be back home. Every firefighter who retires still misses this job.
100%. And it's funny you say that, because I think firemen that retire now kind of have a little benefit because of social media.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a good way to still keep them in the loop. We have a guy who I grew up next to. He was pretty much like a second father to me, who was in our firehouse. And him and his wife retired, and they moved down to Myrtle Beach, and they love it, and they're up here all the time because his sons are still here, grandkids and whatnot. So we still see him often. But it's always funny because, like, I'll be returning from a fire and my phone will ring and it's him. And I'll be like, yo, Jimbo, what's up? And he'd be like, hey, how was that fire? I'm like, how do you know this already? Like, you're like, 800 miles away, and here you are asking about how this fire was. Like, oh, I saw on the internet. And so it's funny how, even being that far away, how social media still keeps them in the loop. And you mentioned like an old timers night type thing or whatever. Our battalion here in our county, we actually have an old timers night. So we have a battalion meeting every few months, and the one that's usually in April or May is designated old timers night. And we invite like older past chiefs and past captains and stuff like that. And that night's kind of dedicated to them. Like, we have a decent meal and whatnot. But a night that sticks out to me with some of the older guys, and I love hearing the old stories. So to me, old timers night and functions where some of the older guys are around, it's beneficial to me because I can feel like I learn from them. We had a dedication for a new engine for the department next to us in Goshen, and we had a nice night, just, and then once things were starting to wind down, I found myself at a table of 2 past chiefs from my department and 2 older past chiefs from that department from Goshen, and they're telling these old stories. And so, like, the beers are pouring and we're all having a good time, and I'm like, wow, some of these stories we're hearing are like stuff that they haven't talked about, and like I never knew. And it was just, next thing I know, like, we're 4.5, 5 hours past this whole dedication being over, and we're still sitting around this table listening to their old school stories. And it wasn't until the next day that, like, I'm thinking about some of the old fires, and I'm like, wow, what they were using as just a session to catch up, I actually took and I learned out of it. So here I am again, number 3, utilizing others, learning from the senior guys about different things that I can still use into my fire service today.
That's great. That really is. And again, it just, what goes around comes around. That's the way
Yeah.
you got to look at it. Right.
Yep.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break here. If you're watching the video, you're not going to see anything change. It's going to be the exact same to you. If you're listening to the audio, you know what's going to happen. We're going to take a quick break. You'll hear a couple of spots, and then we'll be right back with my guest, Chief Tom Marchiano. Right after these words, as always, please stay tuned. And welcome back to this episode of 5 Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green, and with me as my guest today, as we launch season 7 of our podcast, 5 Alarm Task Force, with Chief Tom Marchiano from Chester, New York. Turned out that we weren't so far away from each other back, in the day. He was much younger, though, that day when I was still up in Syracuse, but not too far away from each other. And, of course, not too far from Albany, which is my wife's hometown as well. So we are talking with the chief today about his 6 tips for new fire officers, and we're kind of like expanding a little bit more, because these tips that the chief is talking about are really good for any of us, whether you're the newest kid on the block in the firehouse, or you're the senior firefighter, or you're any officer, line officer, chief officer, etc. All of these tips, because he and I kind of talked about them last week, but all of these can apply across the board if you let them and want them to. That's the key. Okay? Because you can have a lot of ideas out there flowing around, but some people say, no, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I want. And they just shut you down.
Yeah.
So we're trying to expand on that. And I think after we spoke last week, the chief and I really felt that this was going to be a great topic. And I'm hoping, nothing firm yet, folks, but I'm hoping that we're going to get a presentation to a greater audience and invite Chief Marchiano back with us in January. Hopefully, we're going to try to shoot for one of our webinars for 2023. We try to run 2 or 3. I only got 2 done this past year because of my health, but we're going to hopefully, now that I'm getting better a little bit, and going to aim for 3 in 2023. And I'm hoping that we can use this kind of area of a topic to bring in for a great webinar and have the chief join us. So we talked about our first 3 tips, and where do we go in number 4, Chief?
So 4, 5, and 6 are actually probably my 3 favorite. Number 4 starts off, it's actually a real simple one, and it's professionalism. A big thing, especially in the volunteer fire service, is when you become an officer, a lot of times it's ran by elections. So you're there because a popularity contest essentially is how you vote. A lot of volunteer departments don't have any kind of requirements or any kind of like test you have to take to get into that spot. So it's pretty much, so-and-so is running against so-and-so, and I like him better, so I'm going to vote for him. Not always how it should be.
Been there, done that.
Yep. Doesn't always get the right guy for the job. Luckily, in my experience, I like to think that it has got the right guy for the job. But when push comes to shove there, you need to know when to remain professional and be a friend and not a friend. So you might get people who are like, all right, well, my best friend's now the chief, and I can just slouch off and not have to worry about anything. Yeah, you could still be best friends with that firefighter, but you have to be able to put stuff aside and be like, look, bro, like, you're messing up, and I need to be one to do this for you. And you hope it wouldn't come to that. You would hope as your friend, they would be like, hey, I need to be on my extra best behavior for my friend here, make his job easier. So that's like on a respect level and professional level there. Just remember that, again, you were put in this position because of mainly a popularity contest, and I've accepted it. I know how that works. It's not always the right guy for the right job. So just because you have 9,000 training certificates also doesn't mean that you've earned the respect of your people either. I can take 100 classes on truck company operations, but if I've never been to the roof for a fire, why should my guys trust me that I'm good on the roof on a fire? So it's all about experience level with that too. Going out drinking, firefighters like to party. It's no doubt. Just be mindful if you're stopping for lunch one day and you're going to have some.
Whoa. And welcome back, folks. We had a little glitch. The power went out in the chief's firehouse, taking out the router and the internet with it. So we are now back. You may not have realized what happened there, but we did. But we have the chief back with us, and we're talking about point number 4, and the fact that well, I'll let you just reiterate a little bit of that point 4, Chief.
Yeah, so just to get back on track here, point 4 is more about professionalism and even the respect level. When you become an officer or even any point in time in the firehouse, just make sure that you represent, know that you're representing more than just yourself, especially if you're out and you stop for a burger at a pub or something and you have your volunteer fire department or career fire department shirt on. Like, people are looking at you, whether you're a member of that department or not, and they're thinking, wow, look at this guy drinking like crazy and acting like, a real SOB or something. And he's part of that fire department. So you just want to make sure that you're representing everything properly.
Sure.
And just a respect level. Respect is earned, in my opinion. It's not given. I don't like when people become an officer and they automatically demand the respect of the people. That's not how it works. Theoretically, yeah, members should respect the title that you own, but as far as you, like, what have you done to them to deserve their respect? I don't like toot my own horn, but you preached me on earlier. Like, I love working for the guys I'm working with, and I think doing stuff like that does get me their respect level. I treat my guys like they're humans because they are. Just because my rank is above them doesn't mean I, as a person, am above them. I can learn from them. They can learn from me. So as long as it's all about keeping that professional relationship and a respect level, and it's pretty self-explanatory with that, but it's a topic that I feel a lot of people who get into a ranking position kind of forget a little bit.
Right. Good point. Excellent point. And that can also have a strong detrimental effect to the morale of the firefighters under that officer.
100%.
Listen, we know that too.
Especially in the volunteer fire service. So if I'm in a career firehouse and I'm a terrible lieutenant, the guys I work with, if they want to get paid, have to come to work.
Right.
So they have to keep coming to work for me, However, in a volunteer firehouse, if people don't like what I'm doing or how things are working, they don't have to come around. So next thing you know, you're going from getting 3-4 rigs out on a call, and now every time you sign on or they know you're around, you're coming to the call, they're not going to come around because they don't want to deal with you. So it's pretty much the department relies on you, officer, and I guess you could look at a bigger picture that the public relies on you as an officer. In order to help the public, they need those crews. In order for those crews to show up, guys want to be there and work under you. They want to be able to say, yeah, this is my boss, and I'm going to follow him wherever he goes. So that's kind of topic you got to kind of stick to. And
exactly,
it's self-explanatory. There's not really much to explain with it, but it's definitely an important one.
Right. And you got to keep ego out of it.
Correct. 100%. Don't let it get to you. And at some point in time, I think everyone is going to get to that level. Like, there's points in time where people are like, well, why can you do this? And I've definitely thought to myself, well, because I'm the guy in charge and I can do that. And sometimes that is the actual answer.
Right.
Some people don't like everything you're doing, and 90% of the time, if you're making everyone happy, then you're not necessarily doing something right. So, but you always want to kind of have that nice little hey, so and so does like this, but someone doesn't like this. So it means you're doing something right down the line. Um, but if someone does come up to you and they say to you, I don't like what you're doing, why you're doing this, don't just shunt it off. At least have the respect level for them and remain professional to say, all right, what don't you like and why don't you like it? Maybe they have a maybe good reason for it. And maybe you sitting down talking to them can make you think like, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't such a good idea and I shouldn't go this route.
Right. Yeah, very good. That's important. We can learn from constructive criticism.
Absolutely. You never want to, it goes back to the study up thing too. Just because you're the guy in charge doesn't mean you know all. When we do debriefs after fires and incidents for us, debriefing should 100% happen from the top down. So if I'm going to criticize or constructive criticism my firefighters, I should 100% be looking at the mirror at myself and saying, all right, well, what'd you do when you get there? And did you do this properly? And 90% of the time I would look at myself and be like, nope, you screwed this up. So, but that's okay. You said earlier, we're all human. We do make mistakes. It's just a matter of time if we learn from it. And that's, did my firemen arrive alive? Was stuff prevented? Did I do everything in my power to make sure that the homeowner can remain in their house? I'm a big believer that everyone goes home, including the homeowner. So right. I need to be doing everything in my power to make sure we can get this person back in their house.
Great point.
So that's really number 4. I mean, not too much to talk on that. It's important, but it's short and simple.
Right.
Number 5 is another good one that I have written some articles on, and kind of what this presentation is based off of, and that's Guide the Future. So to the public, or even to them, maybe a junior 16-year-old probationary firefighter isn't important. They're not interior firemen. They're not going to go inside this house. They're not going to go cut this car open right away. However, you can't look at it that way. You have to look at it in a way of, at some point in time, that 16-year-old kid's going to be a 21-year-old man or woman, and they're going to be the ones on the line having to hurt his tool at a car accident. So why are we waiting to guide them then instead of just doing it when they're young enough to soak up all this information from us? My new member school has been good. This is my second year doing it. Definitely things I want to tweak on it. But it builds morale. It's tough in our fire department. We have 3 firehouses. And the tougher part about it is each firehouse that has these young kids actually attend 3 different school districts. So really all they know is the people in their own fire department. So they get on scene of this house fire. There's another 16-year-old kid from Station 2, but they don't even know anything about this kid because they don't go to school together and they're in different firehouses. So one thing that the new member school has done for us is it brings all these 16 to 18-year-old kids in,
right,
and it puts them into one setting that now they're friendly with. So when they do show up on scene, it's like, oh, hey, I know this kid. And it gets them to boost their morale and hopefully bring that morale into the future with it. There's always going to be the little rivalry between the 3 companies, and that's healthy. You're supposed to have that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're all there to do one job, all on the same team. And if we can teach these kids that morale at this young age, then they can bring it up if they stick with it and they grow older. One thing that I like to see is them asking questions. We mentioned earlier with the training, the training might not necessarily be an aspect of the realm that they're in, but if we're sitting there and they're asking the question, we should be able to sit there and say, hey, yeah, we'll go over this with you.
Sure.
This is why we do this. And if we guiding them, showing them the ropes, teaching them this is the way, then hopefully they can, I guess, find the fire service as a way to mature, is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids that join the fire service are looking for something to do. We've had athletes come in here that play football, play baseball. We've also had people come in here that don't necessarily play the sports, so they're kind of looking for their thing that they want to do, and sometimes this is it.
Right.
The other thing that we have to think about with Guy in the future, and this is kind of important to me, is times have changed. So society is way different from even when I joined in 04, and I can only imagine how different it is from when you joined.
Right.
But so think of it that way. Like, we get angry at some of these young kids, and I see people, say, hey, kid, go start this saw, go check it. And they never started a chainsaw before. And they're like, what do you mean never started a chainsaw before? Well, for starters, he's a 16-year-old in a society where a lot of people who have houses and whatnot have a company that comes in and does this for them. So he wouldn't ever have a chance to get his hands on that. It's
Right.
it's way different. We like to tell them to drop their phones and pay attention, except for the fact that their phones and computers are the only life they know. So instead of telling them to do that, why not guide them in a direction that could work? So COVID has definitely been rough on us, but has brought us a lot of podcasts and online style training that we can show these kids and say, hey, instead of sitting on YouTube and watching this stupid video game guy, why don't you watch this? And here's a podcast on, roof venting or engine company operations or whatever. And it seems to be working for our firehouse anyway. During COVID, we had an old room in our firehouse that we strictly had gear in, and that's where it was almost like a locker room for our guys to get gear in. What we did during COVID is we included the kids and we made it a project, and we redid the floor, painted up the walls, hung the lockers onto the walls instead of on rolling racks, put some tables in there, some couches, a nice screen TV, and now it's kind of like a ready room for them. So when they're not at school, and if they're down here, they're upstairs and they're doing homework in that room, and they're watching fire engineering videos and getting salty podcasts and other podcasts. And some people might look at that as they're not necessarily hands-on training, but if they're paying attention, they're learning something. So we need to stop looking at the future as they're just young rookies and these kids don't know anything, and maybe take that mentality and start saying, hey, well, they don't know anything because they didn't grow up with that. So we do know it. So let's share our knowledge with them and bring them up.
Great view and great way of doing it, because it's always going to be better when we can take some of these kids in that age group and get them away from the computer screen, away from video games, get them out into the real world. I'm not saying that you can't, disallow and they never use them again. I'm just saying just a break and learn something new, see something else about life. And like you said, you never know. It might be the right connection for them, that all of a sudden they say, wait a second, this is a lot more fun than just sitting in my room by myself playing video games.
Yep.
And, if that happens, then no matter where that avocation takes them, you've made them better, because you've taken them out of that milieu and brought them into a whole different scene that, they may have seen from a distance and say, boy, I'd like to do that one day or something like that. But now you're doing that. You're getting them out of that, the one thing that, society is condemns them for almost today is too much time on the phones and getting your heads out of the screens and
Correct.
getting into life again.
Yep. So what we kind of did is why not take that negative, as people say it, and make that negative a positive? So yeah, you're still watching the phone and you might still be watching your TV screen, but you're watching something that you're learning.
Right.
And into an aspect of this job. We have a group message in our firehouse with our young kids, and we have solid young kids, like from the ages of 16 to 20. They're all home runs. They come around. They're washing trucks. They're doing whatever they need to do. I mean, at the end of the day, they're still kids, so you still have to kind of put them in a direction from time to time. But that's, we were all there one day. Sometimes they'll put in a text message like, "Hey, is anyone around? We want to go over hydrant operations or something." Yeah, I'll come down. So 2 or 3 guys come down, and we'll take them to the nearest hydrant, hit it, show them some different things, and they're happy. But it's getting them out and teaching them the ropes.
Sure.
We'll do that, and we'll do like lunchtime, midday lunch. Maybe we'll come down here, we'll cook lunch, we'll set up a table, and we'll all sit together at the table, and we're just talking, sharing stories, just as like we are now.
Yeah.
And they get a kick out of it. Because in their eyes, and it sounds like it's kind of Buffy, but in their eyes, they can't be like a career department yet. They're too young. But if they're sitting at this table with us having lunch, waiting for a call to come in, like, to them, that this is awesome. This is their, I'm at the point now where I want to sit down and enjoy my lunch, but they're sitting there eating. They're like, "I hope we get a call. I hope we get a call." So when lunch is canceled because of a call, they get all hyped, and I'm like, But so it's good to see, and like I said, we have a decent amount. I would say in the last year and a half, we probably had about 12 new kids join in, and so far they've all been home runs. They've gone through Firefighter 1 academies. There are 2 that are in high school now that the vocational school that they attend in the morning actually offers EMT and Firefighter 1. So
great.
they're in those aspects, and they're teaching that. So even when they're not here at the firehouse, their normal school day is consisting of this, and they're really doing well with it. I know some of the instructors that teach their classes, they're asking good questions. They come down here and they ask good questions here, and to see them into the job is awesome in my aspect, because it reminds me of when I was their age and how much I loved it. So it's good to see that it's still around, and it's even better to see that it's around because of guys like myself and a few other guys here that show them the ropes and make them into the job.
That's great. That really is, because that you're looking towards the future of the department as well.
Absolutely.
So you're helping the kids of today, building a future for them and for your community in the future.
Right. They might not be a lieutenant until 6-7 years from now, but at some point in time, they're going to be at that level. So why not start grooming them for the position now and showing them the ropes? Just because they're not experienced or they've only been here for 3 or 4 years doesn't mean that they're any less of a team member to us. If they've been here for 4 years and we get a new member in who just started, guess what? You're going to be that guy that's supposed to show this guy the ropes, because you're the newest one, and this is how it should be. And they're good at it. They all help out. They eat together on their own sometimes. They're very good about doing like cleanup, which is, not firefighter related, but they're always asking, "Hey, Chief, do you need us to clean this, clean that?" And I'm really proud of our young guys. Like it's something that I stop and look at, and I'm like, all right, like if they're enjoying it and they're doing good, then that means on a chief level, I'm doing the right thing, and the captain's doing good, the lieutenants are doing good. So it all makes the team kind of flow.
Right. Absolutely. Without a doubt. That's the way it should be. And there's great rewards for doing it. You see that in these kids, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
The kids are interested, and they're driven to learn more and to do more, and those are the kind of people you want. Those are the kind of people you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like hanging out with them. It's funny because I was on a podcast with someone else a few months ago, and I said something along the lines of, it's funny because during the summer when the kids are off, they're all hanging around. And when they went back to school, me and one of the lieutenants were sitting here having lunch, and we're like, man, I wish the kids were around. Like, so here's 2 34-year-old guys sitting here hanging out, and they're like, oh, we're the 17-year-olds. Like, they're fun to hang out with, and they're not here. And Now if I want to go start the saw or do something, like I have to do it myself.
So,
Like,
right.
so it's just funny how having them around the firehouse kind of makes everyone kind of happier, and seeing them do well is just good for the morale overall.
Yeah, very true. Very true. It is good for all. That's for sure. And we rounded up with number 6.
Number 6 is something that is important to me. It's definitely become one of my more favorite topics, and more so because of it's something that I've just kind of recently gotten into, but you got to prevent the burnout and take care of yourself. So I have learned that, especially since being chief, that you can't tackle the world. You can't do everything by yourself. And if you do, you're going to slowly drain your body. I had a incident about a year ago, maybe, and like I was feeling dizzy, kind of lightheaded and weak, and I don't know what was like. I thought I was getting sick, so I went to the doctor, and the doctor just said I was like severely dehydrated, and it was like some type of vertigo type thing. I was like, vertigo? Like I'm 34 years old. Like I'm not getting that. And he asked, he's like, what's life like? Is it hectic? Is it busy? And I was like, it's really busy. Like between working 911, meetings every night at the firehouse, training and stuff. He's like, all this was your body's way of saying, that's it, stop. Like I'm gonna do something to you that, I'm gonna make you feel dizzy because I need you to stop doing what you're doing. This is the only way you're gonna do it. So gave me some fluids. I went back home, literally took the weekend off, just sat around the house, watched some movies, watched some TV, and by Monday I was feeling fine. And it's just interesting to me how your body knows that. Like it's almost like a vehicle overheating, and you need to kind of rest. The body was able to do that for me, and I don't want to see anyone go through that. Not that it was terrible, like it wasn't like affecting me or anything like that, but so you got to prevent the burnout, and the first thing to do that is like, what is a burnout? So it's a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that involves a sense of reduced accomplishment, kind of. So in order to prevent that, you want to take time for yourself. It's like go do things you want to do. Go to your gym, take a walk, take a day off. And sometimes my problem is my RDOs at work when I'm off Tuesday, Wednesdays, and a lot of times my Tuesdays end up being a firehouse day for me, doing paperwork and emails and calling people. And sometimes I work harder on a Tuesday than I do 5 days during a week at 901. So, and no one sees it because no one knows about it. So it's always one of those behind the door things that everyone's always like, oh, what could you possibly have to do? But unless you're in this position, you don't know what's going on. I was the same way when I was a lieutenant. What could a fire chief possibly have to do? And now, unfortunately, I know. But so you just have to remember to take the time out for yourself and hit those things. It's, spend time with your family. As I said, I work 5 days a week at 901. And then a lot of times I have meetings at night and doesn't leave much time for home. So you got to take advantage of that when you can, or sometimes learn to say no and be like, hey, I have 2 other chiefs. Sometimes I need to be up to the other guys and say, hey, you know what? I got to be home tonight. Like I can't go to this meeting. Can you cover it for me or whatever? And it doesn't really matter what you do in your own time. Just do something for yourself. It can be, something exhausting, like going for a mountain climb or something. Like that's strenuous work, but if that's the kind of thing you're into, like that's relaxing to you. Right. So it won't be strenuous to you. I'm not going to climb a mountain, but that's just me, but I will, taking my dog for a walk is one of my favorite things. So even if it doesn't have to be long, but it's relaxing for me. For those 20, 25 minutes, that's just me time, listen to a podcast on the walk or whatever, just enjoy the weather. Just make sure that you're taking the break and kind of helping yourself out. And I never really thought about it too much. But but up at our job, like we have a mental health department too that works with us. So kind of hearing them in the background sometimes makes me like, all right, this makes sense. And, seeing some of the stuff that you guys bring up and some of the guests that Nick has had on his podcast, it's you kind of see more and more of the burnout, especially in today's society.
Yeah.
They're making people train a lot. Training hours are definitely going up to do this. On top of doing fire department stuff, guys are working 2-3 jobs because cost of living and everything is going up.
Yeah.
So when you're not in the firehouse, excuse me, your 2 days off are getting filled with, doing carpentry work or cleaning gutters or whatever it is you do on the side. So your days off essentially don't become a day off anymore. And then you do your 2 side job days and you're right back into the firehouse again. So it's just important that some guys take a break, just like, and especially in the volunteer fire service, like just as I would take a break from a vacation from 911, I should be taking a vacation from the firehouse saying, hey, you know what? I'm off this week. Don't, if it's something important, you can send me an email. But I went down to, where was I? Punta Gorda, Florida, in Port Charlotte area.
Oh, sure.
Yep, back in April. And left my phone in the house the whole time. Didn't bring it out by the pool. Didn't answer any emails. I had an automated email saying, hey, here's the deal. I'm on vacation. If you need something's important, call this person. They're going to handle everything for me.
Right.
And it was actually the first time I've been on vacation in quite a number of years. We have a house or a family home up in Narragansett, Rhode Island. So we go there from time to time. But once COVID hit, we had pretty much 2 years there of not really going anywhere, and the only thing I could do was go to work and go to the firehouse. So that's what I was doing. And I think that kind of really bothered me. And I was gung-ho trying to get into my chief spot and setting my goal list. And to begin with, I wasn't really, I wanted to accomplish things. So I was setting that list, and I think it was just too much in too little time. And eventually, your body catches up to you. So when we went down to Florida, it was just a perfect, and the captain was with me because it was his actually in-laws house. So we went down there and we just hung out, had some drinks around the pool, and it was just nice to not have to worry about everything or anything. And that was definitely something that I thought I need to put in my presentation and make sure that people know that in order to be your best, you have to take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
So people expect you to be a fire chief, and when you're on a fire team, you need to be on your A game at all points in time. You can't be on your A game if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right. And you brought up something very, very important to that, which is you can be all gung-ho for the fire service, or as we used to say in Greensboro, eat up with it. But that eventually that's going to take a toll.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't know how to de-escalate yourself, then you're going to wind up in that burnout, and you're not going to like anything.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that you don't like the job or you don't like being at the firehouse, but you just, you're balancing so many pots at the same time that you don't know whether to scream or eat a banana. What do I do next? What do I got? I got to get this done, but I can't. I'm doing this. I can't. If you get to that point, you got to take that chill pill and find a way to decompress a little bit. And whether it's listening to the Calm app on your phone, or you head down to a little pond and you just throw a couple of lures out there, and for 45 minutes, just get out to nature and just fish, or go to a waterfall and just listen to the water. Just do something to take yourself out of the milieu. And it doesn't mean that you dislike it or you don't like it anymore. It just means that you're kind of up to here with it right now, and you need just a little break to decompress, calm down, and then you're right back doing your job, and probably better than you did before you left.
Yeah, absolutely. You just need to just chill. And it's interesting because so I like to turn to sports for me. Like I'm a big sports guy, so I'm a big Devils fan. I'm a Syracuse Orange fan. I'm a Yankee
Oh.
fan, and I'm a Cowboys fan. So,
Yeah, I remember Bayheim days when I lived up there.
oh yeah, yep. So, and it's
Barrier
ironic.
Center.
It's it's ironic because those four sports teams, like I use them to relax, but they usually end up rising my blood pressure anyway. So I don't usually get much to root for with them, but we're doing okay. But that's just something to say. Hey, you know what? I have a meeting Tuesday night. Talk to your chief. Hey, can you handle this? I'm gonna go to the hockey game tonight. Like I'm gonna just kind of take a few hours, do my own thing, and go enjoy a night out, and hopefully watch my team win, which never really happens. But um, almost, it's like you almost leave angrier than when you came, you know. But
Right. Right.
I just think that that's important, and people need to realize what the burnout is. And I think you mentioned it earlier with the cancer stuff. Like it's another thing that's almost like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. Like,
For sure.
let's face it, we're all human. We all see stuff that we shouldn't be seeing, and people need to realize that whether things are getting to you because of things you've seen in the fire service or just because of your workload in the fire service, like it's all right to sit down, chill, and like talk to someone about it.
Exactly.
You know, and it doesn't have to be in a professional level either.
No,
It can
right.
be just sitting down at a, you know, the kitchen table, decompressing a little bit, or even on a podcast like you and I are doing right now. Like here we are just sitting here talking. Like it's not, it's just talking about different stuff. But
Right.
everyone likes to look at it as, oh, well, I'm not crazy. I don't need to, you know, I'm big bad. I'm a machine. Like, well, at the end of the day, like you're still a human, and eventually your body's going to catch up with you.
Machines break down, don't they?
Yeah, that's a good point. I really looked at it that way.
Yeah.
But
Machines break down.
so I definitely think taking your time off is important for your body, and to be your best on a fire scene, you have to be able to take care of yourself to get to that level.
Well, there's no arguing that point. I think it's so important. We've both seen it. We'll continue to see it because there are those who are just driven by their ego.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you'll see that one day they're not the same person that they were the day before because they didn't keep it in check and one of the rivets popped. You know, we're all under pressure in today's society, and it's constant, a constant barrage. I mean, you know, when I was in there back in the mid 70s and the mid 80s, well, mid 70s, my wife and I, it was just the two of us. We didn't have any kids yet. We didn't have our first child till we made it up to Syracuse, and but even then, she went back to work after 6 weeks after each of our daughters were born, and I was still working in the firehouse, and I had a video business on the side, and I was working. I mean, job wise, I was working probably close to 70, 80 hours a week, plus doing these other two things as well. So there were a couple of stress points that we reached that we had to work our way through. And, you know, it's sometimes you feel, well, I don't want anybody else to see that I'm weak because of this. Doesn't mean you're weak. Just means you're human.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah. And like, my friends can always like tell when I don't want to say reaching that burnout period, but like I'm on my way to it. My best friend's a lieutenant in the firehouse, and like he'll call me out on it instantly. Like I'll be sitting there and he'll ask me a question, I'll answer him. He'd be like, "You're cranky again." Like he's like, "Chill, like you need to, you know, you need to hang out." So like his daughter is my goddaughter, so he's so I'll go to his house and decompress. Even just sitting there with her for a little bit, watching her run around is just obviously it's small things like that, and that's what people need to understand too.
Hey, listen, I've been that was my being sick for almost 2 years, but my grandson, who's 18 months now, I mean, that's that smile and just seeing
Yeah.
or hear him laugh when, when I'm in the worst mood because I'm having a really bad day health wise, but my daughter comes over and she'll bring him just to do a quick visit with, grandpa. And that just brings a smile to my face. No matter how
Yeah.
crappy I'm feeling, you're with him and he just makes you smile. And it's just those wonders. So we all have to find those things in our lives that brings us back to a grounded reality that we're okay.
Correct.
Yeah, we have a lot of pressure, a lot of stuff like that, but we're going to be fine.
Yeah. So I think like at the end of the day, like step 6 is, as I said, take care of yourself and prevent your burnout. And I think the answer to all that is find what makes you happy to bring you back to your best version of yourself.
That's a great way of putting it.
And you have to be people expect us to be on our A game, and that's the only way we can get to be on our A game.
Very true. Very true. Chief, this has been better than when we talked last week. I mean, we've been able to flesh it out quite a bit. And I think that all of our viewers and listeners will gain so much by it. And the question is, not the question, but the key fact is, will they listen to it? And that's why I didn't put that's why I didn't put what the 6 points specifically were about. I wanted them to be teased in our promotions and then come and watch it or listen to it to see what the 6 points are, that it really means that these 6 points are to make us better people, not just better firefighters, to make us better people who are doing firefighting as either a vocation or avocation. Because all 6 points that you've brought up and we've discussed today, they apply in every level of the fire service. Career, volunteer, part pay, WUI, we all need that. We all need that. We need to have that balance. And, Dr. Donnie does with my dear friend, Todd LeDuc, who's now with Chief Strategy Officer for LifeScan Wellness, but he was the Executive Assistant Chief here in Broward County. And the two of them now do these balancing your life. How do you find balance in life? And it's geared basically to first responders in general, but it applies to everybody. I mean, the top executives, I don't care how much money you have. There is a point where in your business day, in business life, you're going to come up against a brick wall that you just don't know how to climb over or go around it or pass through it. And you need to be able to decompress one way or another. And so these 6 tips get you to be a better person, no matter what your career is, no matter what your vocation is or avocation is. You can be better if you live with these kind of 6 ideas as part of your life's makeup, who you are, and say, "Ooh, you know what? I'm getting too intense. I got to back off a little bit and just kind of chill out and let somebody else carry the torch for a couple of days, and I'll be back. I just got to recharge the batteries." We say in this lithium-ion world that we're living in.
That's it. Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Like my thing is here guide towards new fire officers, but you could easily take this and put it into any profession there is.
Exactly.
There's no doubt, and it's just it's the way life is, and unfortunately, in this day and age, then the burnout I think is more real than people like to admit it is.
Oh, very true.
I think people are working more now than ever, obviously because of cost of living reasons. But it's pretty much that's it in a nutshell. I left a lot of stuff out for January, obviously, just in case. So I have a whole slideshow presentation and stuff for that. But
that'll be great. Well,
yeah,
I really hope this is going to work. We can do this in January, because I think, as I said, when you and I will talk off the air we'll talk about maybe, a couple of people you might know that might be good to complement this, the webinar. We're going to do it, and I'll run it past Nick and Andy as well. But I think that, you can listen to so many podcasts about tactics and way to do this and way to do that. But I don't think, and I'm just as guilty of it, I guess, with our podcast, is that there's got to be times when what you discuss has to do about you as a person, not necessarily just how to break through a door or how to do a search or something like that. There's more to our lives than just that. And I'm not taking anything away, because you guys have a lot more bells and whistles and toys than I did in my day. We had everybody having a radio today. In my day, there were 2 radios, one in the truck and one in the officer's on the officer's strap. The rest of us, we had to listen to air horns. That's how we knew what was going on. It wasn't the radios because we didn't have them. So, life can be a lot easier in some ways, but a lot more difficult because there's a lot more that, we've specialized. We didn't have officially hazmat in my day. We didn't have high level rescue. I mean, we taught, I took a course in high level rescue, but we weren't climbing towers and stuff like that. So I think that we all have to find that niche that we feel is our comfort level for what we'd like to do in life. A lot of us still volunteer in our churches and communities and synagogues and stuff like that as a way of decompressing, which is wonderful. But just remember that you got to take a few minutes off that clock to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Because none of these other 6, if you don't take care of yourself, which you place as number 6, the other 5 will never fall into place.
That's correct. Because you're never going to be the best version of yourself. And I'm not, the best person to talk about this. Like, I run myself to the end.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
All the time.
Yeah.
But if I'm not the best version of myself, not taking care of myself, then I look like a grouch. If I'm a grouch, the probationary members aren't looking at me, so I'm not guiding them. If I'm a grouch, I'm not being professional to my people. If I get burnt out, I'm not following my goal list because I don't have the ambition to do anything. If I don't have the ambition to do anything, I'm not taking classes. So really, number 6, like you said, is a direct effect on all of these.
Right.
If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't do any of it.
Exactly. And I think we've learned a little bit more because of COVID that we do have to take care of ourselves. Yeah. And I don't mean COVID-wise, but I'm saying we had more time during COVID to kind of reflect on our lives. Yeah. And I think a lot of people learned that lesson. And you know what? And you can see this, but the numbers that talk about who went back to work, who didn't work, working from home and stuff like that. People are doing some great work, but they're just doing it from home. Doesn't mean that they were terrible in the office, but they just have been shining during the whole this change in society. And it wasn't just our society, worldwide. Society's changed all over the world because of COVID. So I think that this was terrific. I think there's a lot more we're going to handle, God willing, in January, and I just can't thank you enough I can't thank Nick enough for recommending and putting this match together. And thank you for your time and the effort and the diligence as a fire service leader to create this, because nothing said you had to. See, you still would have been an assistant chief even if you didn't have this. But you've made yourself a better firefighter, a better fire service leader, and a role model for your firefighters because of your view and the way you look at it. And I think that's the most important thing.
I appreciate
you're a leader that they can look to, who they know, your troops know that you care about them.
Yeah,
and that's that's part of what fuels them, that fires them up, is that, hey, Chief has our backs. He's looking out for us too.
Absolutely.
And that's the key. So thanks so very much for your time today. This was great. I'm glad we had a chance to talk last week, and this kind of insoluble meeting through electronics, but it still works.
It does.
And I look forward to talking with you more in the future and plan for hopefully this webinar if I get my 2 partners here in crime to I think one of them I can convince pretty well.
Probably.
And probably the 2 of us can gang up on Andy and do that too. But this has really been eye-opening. I think it says a lot about who we are. It's just, I'm going to tell you the truth, all of this would have been just as appropriate in my day as it is today, 40 some years later. And I think that's what makes them, all these 6 tips ring true, is that this isn't just because it's 2022. It could have been 1977, 78 when I was starting, and it would have been just as important to me then, especially with everything I was doing and still being a volunteer. So it does. It really, really has a strong, strong basis. And I think those who watch and listen to this podcast and video, and hopefully January, we're able to pull this off in January, will really come away with a fresher vision, hopefully, of both the fire service and themselves and their connection to it. Again, career, volunteer, WI, makes no difference. This is for all of us. And who we are, what we do, and why we love to do it.
I appreciate those words, Steve. Really do, really do. And again, I thank you for letting me come on here and share my presentation here. And hopefully the future will look good, and we'll definitely set something up.
Sounds like a plan. Sounds like a plan. So, folks, if you're watching the video, this will be the end of what you see. If you're listening to the audio, there was a little bit more coming up. So please stay tuned after these words. But again, my sincere thanks to Assistant Chief Tom Marchiano from Chester, New York, on the 6 tips for any new fire officer. And for that matter, 6 tips apply to every firefighter in every department, because it's who we are, it's what we do. But life throws us challenges, and we're better people when we know how to deal with and overcome the challenges and not just cave to them. And that's what life is all about, especially in the business that we love. So thanks for tuning in, folks. And we'll be back in just about a week with our next guest coming up. And we have some great guests coming up. So we have a great couple of months ahead for you. Folks, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. As always, stay safe and stay well. We'll see you next time around.